Unlucky Year 9 religion substitute teacher. Year 10 maths with John Sayre, learning soccer toa and how to go frack to bun. Catching up on many hours of lost sleep in Year 11 legal with Julianne Dawn. Seeing who can make the best paper aeroplane and make it the furthest off the top floor of Dewey. Who could hand in the least amount of homework for the year and not get a detention. And finally, the boarding food is still amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the inevitable things when you attend a boys' school like Nudgee College. They will never change. Yet in my 5 years at the college, many things did change. Majority of the time they were for the better. However, sometimes all I could do was scratch my head, raise an eyebrow, take a massive deep breath and continue writing my Year 12 maths assignment for Louise Nardi. It is this ever-changing environment that is embedded in St Joseph's Nudgee College history that makes me pose the question, were the olden days of Nudgee really the golden days of Nudgee? I now call upon Luke Ingham Myers to begin his team's case.
Mr. Chairman, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, men of Nudgee. It's great to be back. Tierney Auditorium, grand sounding name. For almost a third of this school's life, this building had a far less grand name. Tierney Hall. Hall. Far less impressive. A mere corridor. But what a hall it was. It was a basketball court, gymnasium, bingo hall, exam centre, speech night and valedictory venue. I got my first look at Bishop Battersby, as he then was in this hall, prior to his elevation to Archbishop. Less important, but just as significant, the hall used to host our school dances. Socials, we used to call them. Got my first pash in this hall. Cat Lawson. Oh, golden days. Golden pash. Now this auditorium tonight, and the hall of the past, is representative of the battle between the two teams. For generations, the hall did so much for so many with so little. The auditorium does less, looks better, but geez, it costs plenty. So let's think about what the phrase golden days or golden years means. It's an expression replete with nostalgia. You ready, boys? The golden years of Hollywood, the golden years of Australian sport, familiar terms. Those expressions are filled with a yearning for what we perceive to be less sophisticated times. And yet, times that saw us at our best. Not weighed down with complexities and anxieties, and dare I say the drudgery of the present. No, nostalgia. It elevates the threadbare to the luxuriant. Privations become tests of character. The making of men. And so it is with the olden days of Nudgee. Our perceptions, they shape our convictions. That we did it better with less. And in harder times, but by God we're the better for it. And so the past, stripped of the present woe, will always trump our perceptions of the present. The olden days will forever be the golden days with each succeeding generation. Tonight I'll develop this theme by firstly examining the characteristics of the past generations, their learnings through real life events, when compared to the current generation, who have fed their lessons through better technology, Google, and the mollycoddling. I'll then examine the bonds of the Nudgee Brotherhood, how these bonds were forged, and how the foundation was set for our 10,000 brothers, and the spirit which permeates everything we do. Then Jeremy Horwood, look at him. God's gifted gingers. Fellow First 3 member, 1988. He's going to take us back to a simpler time, where life's focus was more on the personalities of each student, their backgrounds, their individual backgrounds, rather than the distractions of today. Back then, people got to know each other more. Jeremy will then remind us how in the olden days, people, they dwelt on matters that meant more, because of the less distractions that were about, with all the current overload of information and the world issues. In closing, Jeremy will remind us about nostalgia, how it's one of our stronger human emotions, and how it informs policymakers. And no matter how ridiculous the past may have been as you grow old and weary, rightly or wrongly, those days will always be golden. Then there is no one better to wrap up the affirmative case than our third speaker, Boondle Boy. He's been drinking the same water for 50 years. Captain of the First 3. Captain of the Queensland debating team. Boarding supervisor on staff for 5 years. This man knows a golden nugget when he sees one. You will marvel when we unleash Kieran McCarthy, the Colossus of Sandgate Roads. Let's examine the character of the past Nudgee gentleman. I take you back to spring 1985, and an enterprising Year 10 boarder, he returns from leave with a bag of seeds. Not magic beans, but nonetheless fast-growing seeds. This enterprising fellow has a vision to plant the seeds down the back of the flats. He's going to make use of all the spare space down there, the natural resources that the grounds of Nudgee has to offer. He recruits a merry band of workers from the boarding house. They get busy drawing water from Cabbage Tree Creek, set up an elaborate homemade irrigation system. They tend the crop regularly. Much is learned through the nurturing and the growing phase. Soon this crop is so significant, it gets the attention of the Nudgee groundsmen. They're that impressed by the height and the standard of the crop. And they duly report it to this natural wonder to the school leaders. Now, the negative team, they're going to focus on the illegal nature of the crop. But they're missing the point. Looking back now on the efforts, the learnings, the experience these young men gained from this exercise, we here today can only look back in wonder and amazement. It's a shame these boys did not finish their time at Nudgee. I think one of them ducks biology at Downlands. But what a golden experience for them and for all of us that were witness to it. Let's consider education and learnings in the past. Not that long ago, there was no Google, no Google Docs, no Hanley Learning Centre. All we had was a conscientious, mild-mannered librarian called Mr. Hare. His nickname was Pube. Now, poor old Mr. Hare, he only had about 3 staff, 2 sets of Encyclopaedia Britannica, and 1 copy of the Courier Mail. Despite these limitations, grade scholars graduated, armed services and business leaders were commissioned, and young men left the primitive pond of Club Nudge to set themselves up on their own, doing it the hard way. But they and the people they now serve are the better for those modest beginnings. Last week we saw our Year 10s return from immersion, a worthy exercise and a rite of passage for the 10 men. The mad crew that spent 2 to 3 nights on the flats in a cardboard box down the back there, only rice for sustenance. No doubt they got an insight into what life can be like with limited means and resources. What a learning experience. But it was brief. For almost 40 years, Year 11 boarders spent a year living in a Second World War hut known as the Ranch. Starkey, you were there. It had no doors, windows that would not shut, no fans nor heating. That experience was not brief. They were immersed for a very long period. But every kid could not wait to get to year 11 and live under such conditions. It became the making of that group before they went on to be year 12 leaders. Perverse, no doubt, but magical in the way it would strengthen the group. With so little to work with, bonds were formed between the classmates. Sometimes they won, sometimes they lost. But it was the experience in getting through the battle that developed a spirit amongst the cohort. As each generation observed the past generation going forth, they were witness to the good, the bad, and the ugly. All the while they were learning from each other with the one common trait of doing the best they could with less. This leads me to dwell for a final moment on spirit, this mysterious, intangible notion. It separates Nudgee from most other schools. Although we cannot touch it, we are witness to it every day. I was there on Saturday in the full grandstand. I was there 2 weeks ago when the affirmative team got together for a 5-hour lunch to prepare for this topic. It's here tonight in the coming together of generations of family, friends, students and staff. But you cannot buy spirit. You cannot just switch it on. It is something that is distilled over time. It's worked on. It's nurtured. It's tested and it's reworked. Once refined, it possesses great power, but the power can only be drawn from the sacrifices and the efforts of the past. Almost 130 years of voluntary devotion by the Christian Brothers to the education of boys. That's sacrifice. Parents living beyond their means, sending boys off to Nudgee to get a better education. Sacrifice. Boys far from their homes, living in Dickensian conditions, a scuffed up cohort, and in our day a sparse trophy cabinet. Sacrifice. Staff facing that scuffed up cohort, but persisting to educate with limited means, devotion and sacrifice. But boy, was it worth it. Without the deprivations of the past, the sacrifice and the coming together, the olden days would be dull days. There'd be little to no spirit. You wouldn't be at Nudgee. You'd be balancing your Boda hat on your knee for the next 90 minutes. But instead, the latest generation of Nudgee, they get to drink that rich spirit, distilled in the past, as we all toast the days of yore. To the golden days.
Thanks for that, Luke. I think I experienced just about every emotion under the sun throughout that speech. I'm not kidding either. Now I want to call on Freddie Carlton-Smith to kick off the negatives team's case. No pressure, mate.
can't help but imagine that Luke may have been delving into too much of this magical plant when he envisaged this passion this hall. Nonetheless, I'll take him on his word, but what we won't take him on his word on is this vision of the olden days of Nudgee and how gold they were. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Young Boys Case for this evening's great debate. My name is Freddie Cullen Smith, and I graduated from Nudgee last year, and now I'm studying Finance and Economics degree at UQ. I'll be opening our case as first negative, followed by the dashing and witty Zach Arnold at second. Zach's an arts law student at UQ, and he'll be followed by the slightly less dashing and the markedly less witty Corbin Duncan at third speaker. I don't know if you've heard, but Corbin will be embarking on his studies soon as well. Unfortunately, we can't all pass the rigours of UQ admissions. Nonetheless, he's the best we could find, and as such, this, ladies and gentlemen, is your younger old boys team for this evening. To begin, I would like to say how lucky we are to have our older old boys guests here tonight. By all accounts, the trek up from the Viridian nursing home is not wheelchair friendly at all. With the new road that they've built, apparently when you reach Luke's age especially, you have to apply for leave, so we're so glad they in all honesty though, before I get on with my speech, I would like to thank Luke, Scott and Jeremy for coming back to Nudgee and participating despite their busy lives. Luke, Kieran and Jeremy. Comedy debates, well, it's not something I'm familiar with after debating some extremely serious GPS topics, but the preparation has proven to me that they are not exactly easy, and nonetheless, both teams are here for the challenge, so thanks very much for coming. Before I go on, it would be remiss of me not to mention our esteemed adjudicators for tonight. It is great to see Mr. Fuller's smiling face in the audience. I heard there's been some confusion as to why Mr. Fuller isn't debating against us tonight. So just to remind everyone, Mr. Fuller is not an old boy, but simply an old man. Same too to see Angus's smiling face. Here there hasn't been much to smile about given his luck with the ladies recently, but apparently we don't talk about that. And hopefully Angus can rally some of the troops to GT on Saturday and turn that frown upside down. Tonight I'm going to do a few things. I'll define the topic, I'll refute some of Luke's points, and I'll put some forward as to why Nudgee's sporting history is proudest in recent times. So the definition. We want to propose a definition, after much deliberation, of what ages strategically would have benefited us in this debate, as to where we'll draw the line. That is where we can draw the line of what era of Nudgee is indeed old, so as to best have our chances of winning this debate. We tossed up drawing the line when Darrell Hanley began his leadership, given he was the first principal, and not to be a Christian brother. It is also true that this is when many of the major infrastructure programs started here. We also had to consider the world more broadly, and the turn of the millennium. Perhaps this was the best place to draw the line. Or should we call it from when Zach graduated, and avoid some of the media scandals in recent times? But after much thought, we decided it's in our best interest to simply draw the line wherever Corey Braithwaite graduated. None of us can be bothered to find out when that actually is, but not to worry, if you hang around the grandstand long enough, I'm sure he'll tell you. So now on to some rebuttal. I thought it interesting when Luke decided to come up here and tell us how awful Nudgee was and why that somehow made it a good place while he was there. We thought that was quite interesting, and Zach delves quite a lot into how the resources actually are what makes Nudgee the golden age, but we are very willing to accept the sentiment that what makes the place Nudgee so great is more the triumphs of the human spirit than anything to do with the things we are surrounded with, like the now teeny auditorium instead of teeny hall. And as such, we can't but help but champion Luke's cause when we say this. The more of these days we have, as he said, the more history we have, we believe, the better Nudgee gets. The more humans pass through this place who share their own incredible experiences that come from these faraway places that Luke told us about, who have their own stories, the more that every person with those stories puts on this blazer, the more that blazer is a little bit of history added to it, and the more gets added to the next kid who puts it on. So, now I'm going to continue with my substantive. Sports are ingrained into the culture of our school. As an Australian all-boys school, this obviously makes a lot of sense. It makes further sense when considering the primary time we come together as a school outside of prayer is in sporting competition. With the terrace rugby round this Saturday, our collective love of sports and school once again materialises. This key date in both schools' calendar often leaves us with the discussion regarding which school has produced the best sporting history. But it's not often that we discuss which generation has produced the best sporting history. Our side of the house tonight posits that the greatest thing about recent Old Boys is the success in a diversity of sporting arenas, not just in Nudgee's traditional sporting strongholds. Chris Lynn and Joe Burns are at the very top of Queensland cricket, arguably the best batters in the state. Jack McLaughlin delivered on a stage like no other, winning gold in the swimming at the most recent Olympics in Rio. Our first 8 just competed at Henley, and our dominance of GPS rowing in recent times has translated into international representation for many boys, most recently a mate of mine, Isaac Schmidt, on his way to Cox for Australia. Moreover, we have just clinched the football premiership, something unheard of in the older boys' times. Even debating has been strong at Nudgee recently. Our presence here evidences this. To the old boys' credit, they are strongly represented in the lawn bowls teams at the Commonwealth Games. Nonetheless, we are doing better in the traditional sporting fields. I'd gladly ask the next speaker to rehash the infamously poor decade of rugby losses during the 80s, which I will add was their time at Nudgee. I ask you to look to the success of recent years, including last year's premiership, to see just how strong Nudgee sports is among the younger old boys. This has been reflected in the community feeling. Sporting Saturdays are now huge events, with thousands coming to watch games. Further evidence in the documentary this season, which has reached acclaim here, across the ditch, and even further abroad. But as always, the best thing about Nudgee is how it produces the complete man. That is why we have such great role models representing us on the sporting stage. More importantly, it is great to see men such as Sean McMahon and great men of faith like Caleb Timu competing to be some of the best back rowers in the country, representing the Wallabies. I will note that was a picture of James O'Connor. It was sarcastic. And in conclusion, whilst Nudgee's sporting prowess has always been great, the older days feeble in comparison to this generation's achievements. Can't blame them though. We all have a use-by date.
Now, before we continue this debate, I want to make something extremely clear. The target that Freddie just placed on his back, I have nothing to do with. Good job, mate. I now want to call on Jeremy to continue the affirmative team's case.
Welcome all to Tierney Auditorium. As Luke gave us a rundown on its history and its own personal involvement. What do we name our halls and buildings and ovals and so on after legends of our history, after people who were leaders? Because we want to remember them and what it is that made this place and us what we are. For without that, we have no story to tell. No tradition to continue, no colours of which to be proud. And as Luke, who more than any other was responsible for renaming the Senior A debating team the first 3, has eloquently explained, it is not just the names and the places, but the events, the personal and institutional memories that define our concept of the golden days of Nudgee. I want to explore with you a little more these golden days and the concept of nostalgia, but first a few observations on the negative arguments. Well, there's sort of one. We're better at sport. I was disappointed to see the photo of James O'Connor because I was looking forward to bringing that up myself. Sure, you can play any sport you like here now. In the bad old days, there was cricket and swimming over summer, and rugby in winter, and that was sort of it. And now you can do anything you like. It's all sort of shiny stuff. It's, you know, there's so much choice. It's like everything, and it's wonderful. It's a fantastic experience, but winning everything all the time doesn't really teach you very much. We went through the hard years, and Kieran's going to talk about that, the drought. And we learnt what's important about sport. It's not the winning, it's not the success, it's being in there with your mates and learning how to deal with defeat. That's spirit. So I want to go on a bit about a simple time. And Luke's alluded to this. And all children cringe when their parents tell them how much tougher they had it, walking 8 miles to school in the snow or through the bindies with no shoes, getting hit for talking and studying, or not talking, or basically for anything that Brother Fitzgerald felt like. But think about why we use stories. It isn't just to motivate the next generation to realise how lucky they are. It's actually because there's a pride in having lived a simple, perhaps tougher, but spirit-filled life. We relish the simpler times, perceived or real, and within an institution like Nudgee, the stories, the legends of these times are created and passed down to create this golden history. Today, our greatest fear is losing Wi-Fi. Before mobile phones and social media, before the 24-hour news cycle, we had to find our entertainment within our physical environment. Some found it, you know, quite intimate physical environment. The distractions were fewer and required imagination. To get a dopamine hit needed something more than a red circle on a screen. No one was looking at their phones during the first 15 game. During breaks in play, we were all looking at the first manager and mascot, Brother Walt, wondering if he'd fall off his chair again after too much pre-game wine. It happened. If it rained for more than a day or two, you knew there was an opportunity to risk drowning on the water-covered flats in a game of rugby, played by up to 100 with no real rules. I don't know how no one died. Parents were updated with well-censored letters home, but otherwise left us to our own devices. They received a report of sorts at the end of term. If you wanted to speak to a girl, you had to line up for the phone outside Brother Skelly's office. In the mall after night study, put in your 20 cents, dial the number, hope her father didn't answer, and then attempt to have a brief, semi-intimate conversation while being overheard by everyone else in the queue. If you went too long, one of the power boys would hang up for you. But they had more calls to make than anyone else. You like that, boss? It wasn't easy, but it was memorable. Luke alluded to nicknames and the nickname of the librarian of the time. A Nudgee boy was invariably, within a fairly short space of time, allocated a nickname, a form of baptism overseen by one's peers, based on character, proclivities, or often private physical characteristics. One, known as Mono, carelessly lost a testicle. There are no secrets in doing so. Another, a deep sea racing mullet, a particularly fishy appearance. He's now a tax lawyer. Once given, the nickname stuck, generally for life. It was worn as a badge of honour because it reflected the assessment of one's peers, the group within which one formed a part within the institution, a camaraderie of brothers under the rule of another group of brothers, the golden days named and personified. So what does this say about us, that we regard these times of austerity, of less easy lives, of fewer opportunities, of fewer distractions and sometimes cruelty, with fondness, indeed with preference. It's all about nostalgia, of course. That bittersweet yearning for the past. It's sweet because it allows us to momentarily relive the good times. It's bitter because we recognise that those times can never return. And in the face of change and instability which characterises adulthood and the here and now, we reach back for positive memories of the past, which tend to be more clear than negative or neutral ones. How else can we explain eating inedible Hawaiian steaks in the dining room more than once? Our golden days are always the days when we were young or earlier, which is why most of us men, at least, still listen to the same music and wear the same clothes as when we were in our early 20s. And so the character of Nudgee is all about the character of its past, the stories of its past, its golden days. On Saturday, I tried to recapture a bit of past and present glory by watching a day of rugby, first on the flats, an area which I am much more familiar with, and then on Ross Oval, where others more talented than I have partaken more directly in rugby football. When I saw one of our fine first 15 players stretch it from the field, not to return, it reminded me of a piece of Nudgee history which also took place on Ross Oval. It also reminded me of the teller of that story, himself as much a part of the golden days as his stories. He was a scribe of Nudgee history, a truth teller the likes we'll never see again. A brother, a teacher, a husband, a spear fisherman, a crocodile fighter and a priest, the late David Goff. He was my Year 9 geography teacher and we learnt more about Nudgee history in one term than in all the time before and since collected. Some say he embellished the truth or even fabricated it. But I prefer to think that he simply found within his memories and maybe polished a little the nuggets of gold worth pegging. And so it was according to the Gospel of Goff, at the Nudgee versus Terrace rugby match on Ross Oval in 1960-something, as it ever has been and ever shall be, again fought out between the greatest of rivals. And Nudgee's best player, future Wallaby Dallas O'Neill, took a hit and went down badly injured and was removed from the field, put in the back of an ambulance behind the scoreboard, unconscious with a broken leg, while the ambulance drivers watched the rest of the game. The game continued furiously into the last few minutes with Nudgee behind by the narrowest of margins. The crowd roared as Nudgee scored and went ahead, and awoken from his slumber, Dallas O'Neill removed his drip, hauled himself out of the ambulance covered in bandages, nodded to the coach and took his place on the field for the final minute with his broken leg. In the ensuing play, the Terrace winger, a giant of a man, made a break and looked destined to score and win the game when O'Neill made the try-saving tackle before being repatriated to hospital. Vale Dave Goff, and long live the old and golden days.
Thanks for that, Jeremy. I really enjoyed that narrative. What I took from the start of that narrative was Jeremy enjoyed losing. I now call upon Zach Arnold to continue the negative team's case.
Good evening, Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the Nudgee community, and of course, good evening to our opponents who have come out tonight to make an attempt, but it's a sad attempt. Kathy would be disappointed. But as Freddie before me has argued, the olden days of Nudgee simply were not the golden days. Present day Nudgee is full of life, we're achieving more in sporting and academia. Nudgee spirit is at its peak. Ladies and gentlemen, the only thing peaking in those times was the Soviet Union. Each year in these days, the school churns out cohort after cohort of devilishly handsome gentlemen. I can't speak for those days or what their cohorts looked like back then, but I won't go there. On that note, I'd like to quickly deconstruct some of the arguments from the older boys, with the main argument being about a character-building Stone Age, where they had no Google, no internet, possibly no electricity. The only thing missing from this argument was the shaking fist in the front lawn. And I'm not quite sure where they were going with this. My only explanation possibly is that the asbestos exposure from those olden days might have fogged their cognition. And as for all the anecdotes about growing up with mates in the olden days, I wasn't sure whether I was watching a debating speech or Stand By Me. But I'll say this. Golden days are the days that have the most quality. Nostalgia's a trap. Believe me, someone losing their gonad is not something to look on with nostalgia. I'm sure the 1800s would seem nostalgic until you're lying in a gutter with rotten teeth. And as for the sports stories and sporting spirit, I believe Freddie already covered that, and I'll have plenty of stories from 8F's rugby as well, but I won't humour you with that. There are too many to count. Now, if you still believe that those olden days were the golden days, and that might be a sign that you were victim to the poor education practices of the olden days. And the issue of education standards is my area for the speech. So firstly, golden education is what makes a golden school. And over time, the standard of teaching at Nudgee has only gotten better. For instance, most of us here could at least name a few teachers here at Nudgee nowadays. There's Miss C, Miss Daunt, dozens. But how many Nudgee teachers from the 1980s could you name? I, for one, couldn't name any. They clearly lack the same reputation as our modern teachers, a reputation earned by being efficient, likeable, and at the golden standard of their occupation. That's not to say that teachers in the olden days were below par. Just that Nudgee's modern day teachers are on a whole other level, a golden standard, you might say. There's a reason for that. The education standards in the olden days weren't up to scratch. And for one, the teaching techniques were a bit more hands-on, but in a bit of a more violent way. Whether it was the rulers used on students' fingers or the chalkboard erasers being hurled at students' heads, most of the education they got in the olden days was on how to most creatively use a classroom item as a weapon. You could argue it's mildly practical or character building, but just how low is the standard for the golden days of Nudgee? And sure, they might claim it's because teachers are more effective at controlling classrooms, or they might nowadays bow to the students with iPhones and helicopter parents. But then how poorly behaved were they to deserve bruises like that? The answer is very. It's a common argument that kids these days are too distracted by their mobile phones and other gadgets. That students in the olden days were just as, if not more, distractible. For example, it was incredibly hard in the 1960s, in the olden days, for a Nudgee teacher to control the classroom when you had students using Rubik's cubes or pushing a wheel with a stick. Nowadays, teachers know how to deal with distracted students without resorting to a razor-fueled violence. Studying is also now more practical, and we're really in the golden era. Every Nudgee student has a device connected to the internet, which is not the end of the world. And on the other hand, classrooms back then were, not to exaggerate, but almost certainly in the dark ages. We can only assume our opponents would personally remember studying by candlelight and avoiding wax burns. It was a real inconvenience too when your inkwell ran out of ink or your feather quill went blunt. The classrooms were also a health and safety hazard. If the Nudgee classrooms from the olden days were still around today, they would be shut down quicker than you could say asbestos. It simply wasn't an environment fit for study. And that is evident from how drastically our results have improved. In the last couple of years, we've had dozens of OP1s. In the olden days, we didn't even have any OP students. In conclusion, the olden days of Nudgee cannot have been the golden days. For the reasons I've stated, the educational standards were not up to scratch. And when a school isn't up to scratch there, it's hard to say that you're in the golden days, even if you have nostalgia. And especially when the generation, a part of the so-called olden days, grows up to put the nation in crippling debt. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Zach. I just want to say, more on Zach's point, that I'm very impressed that the older of the old, I've got to be careful what I say there, are buying into the modern day school environment. I haven't seen one ruler or a razor thrown across the room yet. I would now like to call on Kieran to conclude his team's case.
Men and women of Nudgee. One of the topics that I recall popping up in our days of debating at Nudgee was this old chestnut. Nostalgia ain't what it used to be. Now, being very sharp, intelligent students, our first question of our debating coach was, Miss, is there going to be sub-raft debating tonight? You see, in our nagging hunger, we never realised the truth in that particular topic. Our perceptions of the past never really completely accord with what actually went on. It doesn't matter. Most of us airbrush the past to some degree, for one reason or another. And the great Barbara Streisand, now that's the first time she's been mentioned in a Nudgee debate ever. So history is being made. She sang of misty watercolour memories. Now, even if our memories of Nudgee more accord with the outflow from the Porter's Laundry after a muddy fight on the flats, we cling to those memories. Because as Nudgee boys, we are indoctrinated to do so from day one. Son, you mightn't be the next Mark Lane, but by God, you'll learn who he is. So thorough is that indoctrination that by the time mortgages, kids, school fees roll around, I can assure you, I promise you faithfully, that the olden days of Nudgee look like the golden days of Nudgee. Even if your school days are more akin to Lord of the Flies rather than Goodbye Mr. Chips. The memories glow as a beacon in that foreign country we call the past. As Pete Murray reminded me once, he says, the 87 seniors motto, we came, we saw, we got the lowest ASAT score. Well, you know, that's become a virtue in the retelling of the inflection of time. So, now, we don't say, ladies and gentlemen, for 1 minute, that this galvanising nostalgia is good, bad or indifferent. That's a completely other debate. Okay, what we are saying is that perception is reality, that the olden days will always be the golden days, not only because of our perspectives, which are different from the decades to the decades, but because of our indoctrination, which is common, and it persists to this day. Now, before I proceed, let's tackle the opposition's case. Now, that quiet oracle of Nudgee, Dennis Stark, did once remark to me that comparisons are odious, but that's what debating's all about, so let's have a look at the odious opposition's case. Now, Freddie sets up a case that has the diversity and variety of endeavour of today's Nudgee trumps anything the past can throw up. And that's all very well for the elite, but what about the rest of us poor battlers? You know, those of us that were in the 14 Fs or the Gs. You know, you see, the corporate experience of Nudgee College is the sustaining narrative as the years pass. Sure, you know, Hugh Hamilton still, to these days, bangs on about his times at GPS and how he bested James Bush. But, you know, John Seaman flogged both of them by about a minute, so it really doesn't matter. You know, that in those days we finished just about last at every GPS sport. You know, debating broke the adrenaline, so in 1983. The fact that we finished at just about last at every GPS sport didn't matter. What mattered was who cheered the loudest, who had the most outlandish bloody costumes at GPS Athletics, and who won the food fight with Ibby Grammar. That's what mattered. Badges? We don't need your stinking badges. Honour before honours, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Zach, that's a millennial name. Bit of a millennial argument as well, okay? Because it's all better now until the next big thing, all right? But fellas, when employment beckons, you'll be surprised how nostalgia gets you that job. I think I've had enough. Can I pause to say before my team summary gets underway, how good it was to join with Ian Myers in this little outing. Now, Luke was one of the most enthusiastic young debaters. When I was in year 12, he was in year 8. And Luke enjoyed more than anyone the anarchy of the Nudgee debating bus down to Southport on a Friday night. You know, the lack of preparation until the street turn off, you know, the rock-overs in the back of the bus, the stash of biscuits liberated from the Southport kitchen, Miss Gia selling a spare. You can't buy memories like that. You see, Luke has reminded me, as he has done all of you this evening, that the bonds of brotherhood forged in those lazy, hazy, crazy, I didn't say hazing, I said hazy. Those bonds, you know, were the foundations of Nudgee spirit. That's where the Nudgee spirit was set. You know, the days when only posh schools rode, you know, when the only culture at Nudgee was agriculture, okay? You know, when NC stood for no chicks, and we were proud of it. Some people will even tell you that we were self-taught. Now, those are the sweethearts that sent their kids off to terrace. But for the vast majority of us, such privations, real or imagined, are the red badge of courage. All right? It's the Nudgee mythology, people. All right? It's the school hacked from the scrub at the edge of Brisbane when Queensland was on its knees in the depths of drought, staffed by tough blokes from Ireland who whipped into shape these wild colonials from the bush, these boys from the islands, and the occasional Ascot Mummers boy. You know, to turn them into the 10,000 brothers. The glorious past sustained us through that great rugby premiership drought of 1972 to 1986. Look, you know, even the 1982 bumper sticker said, Nudgee, 4 wallabies. Which, you know, on reflection was pretty pathetic in light of the fact that Terrace had handed us our trousers for about 5 years running. But, you know, look at the scoreboard, boys. You know, Churchy would have to win every rugby premiership between now, 1982, and 2000 to beat Nudgee's record. All right? So Luke said, with conviction, with great conviction, Luke, you can have your Reach for the Stars tutoring program, you can have your boarding village, you can have your Hanley Centre for a galvanising narrative. Who can beat night study with Skell, Mental and Lloydie Lynch? Who can beat a year in the ranch with Buddha or Thromer? You know? My brother Horwood has really left our opposition with nowhere to move, with the mention of the great Dave Goff. You see, that name alone proves the case. That's it. Go home. But Jeremy wanted you to know more. He really did. And he told you more. And how Goffy, recently gone to his rich, rich eternal reward, was the embodiment of Mr. Golden Days of Nudgee. As a boy and a man, this modest, gentle giant was the epitome, in all seriousness, of muscular Christianity. You know, he was a postulant for the Christian Brothers, a lay teacher, a married man, a widower, a priest, a prison chaplain, and not to forget, the greatest fisherman to ever come out of Papua New Guinea. Look, like the great man himself, he had an affinity for parable. And those that were lucky enough to be taught by Dave will take away from his parables huge life lessons. And what did Goffy and Jeremy prove? That Nudgee in its real or imagined simplicity of yesteryear, its community born out of privations, real or imagined, trades on its collective nostalgia to exhort us to give of our best in the present, to ascend what Terry Sullivan would call a truly phenomenal jinx before he flogged the buggery out of all of us. Look, we've all had a bit of fun with this topic, but I must speak with particular conviction tonight. The spiritual epicentre of this college falls somewhere between Our Lady Help of Christians Chapel and Rosso. And the times that we've walked past those rolls of honour outside the chapel are too numerous to count. And we passed by them without a thought. But I want you to consider this. At the time that the men, the first men on this roll, gave of their lives, O'Keefe at Poziere, Mestre at Menon Road, O'Sullivan at Bonnet, on the Western Front, today but a few, Nudgee was less than 1,000 brothers. It was a school less than 25 years old, hacked out of the scrub, and a Catholic one at that. The establishment the ruling establishment of the day could never imagine and did not expect that the cohort of this small school could answer the call of a Commonwealth not 14 years old. But flock they did. Their sense of civic duty dovetailed into their religious conviction. And they went off to war again and again and again. And those that came back, who were lucky enough to come back, have done a disproportionate amount to deliver us the great country that we live in. So when I stand at the grave of 21-year-old Bert Horseman, Nudgee boy, I reflect on the large part of that young man's life that was spent at this college, and how his formation at this college must have put to bed the stigma of nagging doubts he had regarding his German name and heritage, and informed his sense of duty to God and country. And I think to myself, in the chill breeze coming off the nearby Somme, and as the wind causes the young wheat to wave in a Hosanna-like fashion for the Ghost Legions, I think to myself, by Christ, what men these were, and what a place Nudgee was.
Despite the fact that Kieran spoke for 4.5 minutes longer than his allocated time slot, that was beautiful, ladies and gentlemen. And now Corbin Duncan, ladies and gentlemen.
We've heard a lot of tall stories tonight, so I thought I would start with one of my own. Luke, Jeremy and Kieran were walking along one day and tripped. They're a bit klutzy, but we won't dwell on it. Luke, Jeremy and Kieran were walking along one day and tripped. The Nudgee Bear appeared and told Luke, Jeremy and Kieran he would grant them one wish, anything they wanted. Now, one of them pipes up and asks, Nudgee Bear, can you make the olden days the golden days? The bear laughs and says, not even with all of my power could I make the olden days the golden days. Wish again. Jeremy says, okay. Nudgee Bear, can you make us relevant again? The bear says, let me take another look at those golden days for you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry, hearing difficulties. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Corbin, and I graduated last year, or as I like to say, last yeet, but that's a young person joke, so you probably won't get it. As Mr. Fuller would say, thanks for going the distance with us, especially because it's past our old boys' bedtime. I know tonight has been a barrage of somewhat less than funny old people jokes, but I can assure you they aren't over yet. Now, this might be the first debate for some of you, so let me help you through it. Typically, the third speaker summarises the debate, and it's clear we've had a strong, youthful, energetic case, powerful case put forward by the negative team tonight, and the other guys were all right too. So I'm going to go over that and tell you who's right and who's wrong. But we are incredibly grateful to have our old boys joining us and taking time out of their busy schedule to join us and debate us. Can we have a round of applause for our old boys? This has no doubt been a massive hit to their self-esteem. No, but seriously, like to be wheeled out of the museum to face 60 minutes of insults is something special. Just to get a general gauge of the audience though, if you are supporting the negative side of the house, they are young, they are devilishly handsome and go to somewhat mediocre universities, please give them a round of applause. And we're not above asking for a round of applause either. But if you are supporting the affirmative side of tonight's debate, please give them a round of applause. There's a few of you. I'm surprised. surprised you're still awake. For the old guys, though, who did clap, bathroom break soon, so it's all good. The olden days. That must have been tough, huh? Writing with ink and quill, pigeon messages, and burns from your candles dripping all over you. I'm saying they didn't have electricity, which is what I've been led to believe.
Funnily enough, there were electricity strikes.
Proves my point. Ladies and gentlemen, though, our opposition would have you believe that they were unwitting, innocent victims in this terrible saga and terrible Stone Age. Gentlemen, the standard you walk past is the standard you accept, and you are not innocent in this at all. When we think of the olden days, as my first speaker pointed out, we think of communism reaching its zenith, polio, the death of JFK. These were the olden days. Coincidence? I think not. So now, typically, a third speaker moves to rebuttal. This is probably a really good time to tell you that we started believing some of our jokes, and they've really shown us up tonight and impressed us. So let me fumble for some rebuttal right now. The three really important topics tonight were Nudgee's state in the olden days, technology, and the personalities that define our era. Now, the affirmative team described Nudgee as a really pitiful existence, which isn't really in line with Nudgee's spirit, but we'll overlook that for now. They described it as pitiful in almost every way possible, in education, punishment, facilities, premiership droughts, and dare I say, it's people too. They described the decrepit conditions of the boarding house. Pleased to tell you, the only stars our boarders sleep under are 5 stars. Moving to technology, I can wholeheartedly say that technology has really enhanced our classroom learning, and it's made the pursuit of knowledge so much more efficient and effective, and I think that's certainly demonstrated in our academic outcomes today. I will say though, for these, the opposition would have you believe that our computers are despicable machines. I find that a bit rich considering they all typed their debates tonight, and you'll have us here know that we hand wrote them, which I'm very proud of. We also saw a perfect demonstration though of technology and its effectiveness tonight in Freddie's really effective PowerPoint. It was seamless. And the AV crew is incredible as well, as you will see. Sorry, that genuinely are incredible, if that was not clear. But moving on to the personalities that have defined our time. First of all, Dave Fletcher. Perhaps a modern day Brother Goff. We all can make these sort of comparisons. Funnily enough, he is also a humanities teacher. And I just want to read you an email that I received from Dave Fletcher just a few days ago, which will probably give you some idea of what a character he is, and how he makes our days the golden days. I emailed him asking to know what were some of the slang and terms that we used back in the olden days, and he had some interesting things to say. He said, "Hi Corbin, good to hear from you mate. I'll see you at the rugby for sure. Here are a few slang words off the top of my head. Darbing, smoking. The NCDC, the Nudgee College Darbers Club. A snapper, a skinny kid, a Jed, a kid with no mates." He's got in brackets, a bit mean, that one. The Crows, the brothers, they were all dressed in black. And they're the few that I can remember. Yours sincerely, Dave Fletcher, a truly great man. We also have people like Mr. Canellan, who run our social justice program, which is quite interesting considering the opposition tried to describe us as elitist, posh and odious. Only one of those are true. But the truth is that our social justice and immersion program today is incredible, and it provides experiences to Nudgee students that they never would have received prior to that. Louise Nardi, I think everyone knows, and her reputation precedes her. She devotes countless hours of selfless tutelage in math and life. There is no doubt that the personalities who define Nudgee today most certainly stack up to those who I'm sure defined Nudgee in the olden days. Moving on to a wrap-up of tonight's debate. So we heard from Freddie at the start about sport and a comparison of how our sporting premierships weigh up against their drought, and how our sporting heroes, the esteemed James O'Connor, stacks up to theirs. Our second speaker spoke about education. Zach spoke about how we have increasing education standards all the time here at Nudgee, and how we are becoming a leader as an academic school. I will say though, the poor and subpar education standards of Nudgee in the olden days might give us somewhat of a disclaimer for the opposition's arguments tonight. And I would also say, if you agreed with any of their arguments, it might cause some self-reflection. But to conclude, ladies and gentlemen, we the young old boys, are most certainly adamant that the olden days were not the golden days, and that Nudgee's golden days will always be its present. And to conclude, I have a quote: "The golden days weren't even silver."
Now I'm just waiting to get the final nod from our adjudicators. Are we ready to go, Mr. Fuller?
I think we need to adjourn as you're doing a formal debate, discern our decision, and then we'll be back to you presently.
Alrighty.
Chairman. Chairman.
adjudicators to give their adjudication for the night.
Ladies and gentlemen and Nudgee men, can I just say a couple of words before Angus will pass on this adjudication in what's been a terrific occasion. And as Greg Thorne said at the beginning, I just want to acknowledge Monica for her energy and organisation in making what's been a really special night possible. So Monica, to you, thank you very, very much. Can I just say a couple of things? It's evident there was a reference there to the 10,000 brothers, and I think for our boys who are sitting here and listening to the older old boys and the younger old boys, there's a lot to be said for all that they had to say tonight. And what was clear to me was that passion for this school, that sense of that special Nudgee spirit that binds these guys from their time and equally binds these guys from their time and binds our boys in their own time. I'd have to give a bit of credit. It doesn't matter in their debate, but I have to say these boys here came together with coat and tie, which led to left. These guys are unshaven, no tie, no coat. I think you've got to say that they started behind the 8 ball for me. The older old boys. And I've got a bit of special commendation there for Luke for the very special Nudgee coat that he was wearing from days of yore. The fact that he can fit into it still is also highly commendable to you, Luke. Well done. I must say the 5 hours of preparation over, I'm not sure, half a dozen bottles of red wine, it might have helped, but then it might have hindered a little bit of the thinking, I'm not too sure, fellas, but commendable for the effort as it was for the boys to come together. I just want to say thanks very much, it's been terrific. I'm going to leave it to Angus to pass on our decision.
He pulled rank a bit there, so I'm deciding who would do this, so give it to him. And also to Corbin for throwing a lot of shade for someone that's leaving for Harvard in a few months. Pretty brave there. So this does go to the old boys. I think the tie jacket did actually help. They did speak about quite a lot. The magical plants, the ranch, which I think Murphy House is still pretty similar to. Hasn't changed too much. And just kind of spoke a lot about character development, while again, Corbin really just threw shade. That's really, really good. So, and to the younger old boys, they did great. For some boys that are balancing uni, missing lectures, I guess. I reckon that's what Freddie probably does a lot. And then Zach also showing up pretty good, but also upsetting to hear that he did not name Miss Nardi as one of the top teachers. So, sorry to you, Miss, I know you're out there somewhere. Mr. Thorne was not joking when he said, it's bright down here. So yeah, thank you for coming tonight. Round of applause to both teams. To yourself to make it out on a Thursday night. I know that this is definitely where I want to be instead of doing English study. Sorry, Miss, see you. So you're around here as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much for the adjudication. In true debating spirit, I would like to call on the negative team to deliver a vote of thanks initially.
I think a quick apology is in order. A few cheap jokes there, but all the laughs are in good fun, and this much anticipated debate was everything we expected it to be. We're so happy with the outcome. I'm so glad. Thank you to the audience and everyone for coming, everyone for organising it. Thank you to our adjudicators, and thank you to our opposition for an excellent debate. Win was very well deserved.
And I now call on a member of the affirmative team to deliver a vote of thanks.
Thank you, Toby. I'd like to thank the negative team, reminding us of our age. We're living it, so that's all right. When I first emailed these boys and got them lined up, we all cringed, but we have thoroughly enjoyed every step of the way. We don't know what to do tomorrow. But despite everything we said, the college has never been better. It's so far removed from our experience, and that's a good thing. As great as it was, it's stunning now, and that's why our boys are here, making the most of everything that's here. So we're very proud old boys, so please keep it up. It's just so pleasing to see you on the sporting field and driving here in the grounds these days. So we're very, very impressed. And in the true Nudgee spirit, my two fellow first three members, 3 cheers for the opposition. Ingui?
Yeah.
Ingui?
Yeah.
Ingui?
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming out. It's what has been a fantastic night. I now declare this debate closed. And can I please ask that everyone please return their glasses out to the bar?